Hey all, this is 012Boku, and I'm coming at you with another review of a movie, and this time it is, we are on Jobs, doing a movie review on Jobs, and as you guys can see, it is I didn't know there was another movie that was done with Michael Fassbender and Seth Rogen, and I think maybe a few others, few years ago. I didn't know that was done, but this is the one with Ashton Kutcher, where Ashton Kutcher played Steve Jobs, and it was done in 2013, directed by Joshua Michael Stern, and this movie, at least in my opinion, goes with a couple friends. We did talk about the factual and someone made up stuff in this movie, but I do believe this film does do a good job telling the life and times of Steve Jobs, where he is a freshly college dropout and trying to apply himself in better ways, to where he goes from being like a hippie to the Apple media mogul that I guess people know and love, or you dislike, because for me, I was not the huge biggest fan of Steve Jobs or Apple. I really didn't care or like the Apple products, but I do give Apple its place in technology and society. I do think there are other products better than Apple in my opinion, but hey, that's just me. But with the film Jobs, it basically again chronicalizes his life from, I think it was 1974, from again being the freshly college dropout to him talking about a college professor, to where I don't know if this was real or whatnot, but his college professor, Jack Dudman, basically tells him, I don't care if you want to have a degree or not, or in college, just learn something, create something, care about your education, and he does still go to some classes, and he starts to learn a little bit about more of technology and whatnot, to where he's going, and he learns from a professor, which I don't know if I put him down, but it was I forget what his name. I think it was Jack Holden or something like that. I forget the actor, but his college professor is telling him about technology, where he's writing zeros and forms of code. He goes to India to basically live life, live free with his druggy friends, and one being his friend Daniel Kopke, to where they go up to India and learn about life, and to where, we see shines of Steve Jobs' brilliance. Steve Jobs then by 1976 goes on working for Atari, to where he's trying to create good things for Atari, getting on the young guys, creating games, and Steve Jobs wants to see stuff that pops in color, and all these types of things. Plus, he's wanting to make the big bucks and do bigger and greater things. Along the way, he badgers one of his employers at Atari to make a game, to make a big thing, and his developer manager goes, "Steve, I like you, but you're an asshole, but tell you what, if you can create a game for Atari that we really like, I will pay you $5,000. And Jobs is trying to build this machine and create a game. He knows that he wants to make a game, he just doesn't know how to do it. He's not great with putting stuff together. And then he calls his friend Steve Wozniak to help him build it. Steve Wozniak helps him build the Atari game, and Wozniak even brings up, hey, for working on this, how much are we going to get paid? Steve doesn't mention the $5,000, but he says it's $700. And Wozniak go, that's a bunch of dough. So Steve lies to Wozniak right away about how much he's getting paid to make the game. Wozniak helps him make the game. Steve Jobs brings the game to his manager. The manager really likes the game. He gets paid, and then he ends up giving Wozniak only $350. He sees Wozniak as working on a home computer that can process computer codes and stuff on TV at your home, and you have Steve Jobs start to think that they could use this to build on something and start a company. They go to Stanford Stanford University to go to a class where they talk about computers and what they can do. Wozniak is giving the presentation. Wozniak is bored or boring. Nobody's listening to him. You have people leaving, but then you have one guy. I wonder if I put him down. No, I didn't have him down, but his name was Paul, and Paul gives Steve Jobs and Wozniak the chance to build something. So Wozniak and Jobs start putting together these computer boards. I mean, it's all what they seem to be building. Along the way, you have Wozniak and Jobs try to put together something. They actually get the Jobs family garage, and Steve Jobs' father, Paul Jobs, is letting Wozniak and Steve use his garage to build the computer boards. Wozniak is by himself. Steve Jobs goes back to the other Paul that he's working with to make something. This manager, Paul, is telling Steve Jobs he wants full computers. Jobs is thinking he just wants the boards. So they're needing to move faster on the boards, and you have Jobs wanting to care about presentation, and Wozniak's about getting it done and making it work well, not really so much the presentation. So he brings in his friends, Daniel Kotke. Let's see, Rod Holt is one person who looks at their ad and has them help. There's also, let's see, where was his name? He's on here too. I know I put him down. Oh yeah, Bill Fernandez, Chris Espinoza, and I think another friend of theirs, Bill Atkinson, who all comes to help them start to build. And throughout the time, they're building these computer boards. They get them done. Paul wanted full computers. Steve didn't understand this, but he was thinking of, bigger and better things. He gives Paul the boards to sell on his computer thing to where they could use it. And then they're starting to build, the first ever Apple computer, and they're going on this journey to build Apple Computer and build their company. Steve Jobs is trying to talk to different computer companies and different people to get their attention and build his empire with his friends. And along the way, we start to see Steve Jobs' madness come out of him, just the sheer control, volume, his greed, and his just control. I mean, again, he's a brilliant mind for putting these things together, and he can think of ideas for great products. However, he's not the builder, he's not the person. His friends are starting to question, especially Wozniak and Daniel Kotke. They're starting to question, it goes a long way to build these things. We're only just us. You need to think of some things. And again, Steve Jobs isn't completely wrong, but neither are his friends. Like, Steve's reach is far exceeding his grasp, and his friends can only build so much as fast at a time. And you're starting to see that madness just start to come. Along the way, as they're getting bigger, you have Mike Markula come into play, and he's an executive who takes them under his wing to build these things and to do it. And then they're presenting Apple, the Apple II, which is their newest machine, which they hadn't even gotten off the ground yet. Their first Apple computer was barely made and out, and now they're making an Apple II, and it was done at a press conference and convention in, I think Palo Alto, California, or Pasadena, California, wherever they were. And then, the Apple company has grown. It's big, it's huge. Steve Wozniak, all their friends are a part of this company, and Steve's arrogance and even brilliance has entered a new level. And along this time, you basically see where things with Steve Jobs' friends have unraveled. And, he's still pretty chummy with Mike Markula, but even Mike Markula sees how his ire gets easily worked up now. Wozniak is thinking, what are they doing? Are they still doing something fun, or is this just all about the business? Kotke doesn't seem like he wants to be there. Kotke even defended Steve Jobs' ex-girlfriend, Chris Ann Brennan, who had gotten pregnant with his child, who Steve Jobs ignores and doesn't want to take part of because, he's more about his business. There's even a thing where he doesn't even want to give alimony to Chris Ann Brennan because he thinks she doesn't deserve it. There's even a thing where Mike and him are meeting with the lawyer, discussing who gets royalties. He gives royalties, I think, to Rod Holt because he built it, but then I don't know if he gives it to Wozniak because you don't hear Wozniak's name mentioned, but he doesn't give it to Kotke, Fernandez, Emilio, Atkinson, Espinoza. He cuts all the rest of his friends out of the royalties, and I thought that was messed up. And then he starts having problems with his board members and investors. Arthur Rock is the main board member who, he's arguing with all the time. Mike's trying to bat for him, to protect Steve. Steve does go off the handle, and you can see where the board members are thinking of money. Steve's trying to think of the vision, but also the money and the power. And, the first time I thought the board members were in the wrong, and I still think in many ways they are in certain scenes, but at the same time I can understand what the board is getting at, because you had Steve Jobs picking fights with IBM. Microsoft even says Microsoft stole his idea for the Macintosh, which it's not mentioned in the movie, but my friend Thunder Darkstone mentioned how Microsoft did come up with it first. It wasn't Jobs. They just beat Steve Jobs to it, and it is a part of Bill Gates' Microsoft's, first project, and so Bill Gates didn't steal it. He actually had the rights to it, so Steve Jobs apparently was in the wrong on that. And it just became this big thing where Jobs was becoming a loose cannon. He brought in, when the Macintosh was built, he brought in John Sculley to help him be an interim CEO and also be a voice of Apple to help them do it, because John Sculley used to work for Pepsi. But then Arthur Rock and the investors get their hands in John Sculley, and they're trying to make John Sculley the actual CEO. There is I'm going to say Mike Markula was sort of ganged up on by the board members, and he ends up siding with the board instead of Steve. Steve loses control of Apple, and they kick him out to where Steve is with his dad near the end of the movie, and he's sad about what he lost. His dad doesn't say anything, but he's there to comfort his son. And it just goes on to where, it leads to where we see what Steve Jobs did, and did settle down, have a family, but then he eventually gets his stuff back at Apple from working his way back up and doing some intermediary stuff where they cut out the board members entirely. And there's even another, again, betrayal with Steve Jobs and Mike Markula, but that Steve getting the one-up on Mike Markula and forcing him out. And again, I don't know if this was true or not, but it looks like Mike Markula didn't want to do what he did to Steve. Like I said, it seemed like he had pressure from the board and was forced to agree with the board members. But again, the way I view it is Steve Jobs was going off the handle. He was building big products that were way too, I think, huge for the consumer, even though Steve is like pricing out the consumer. But then the board members go, you spent way too much money on this project, so no one's going to be able to afford it. No one's going to want to buy it. I mean, the Macintosh was a good thing, but maybe it was at first, and then from what I know from Apple computers, the other Macintoshes weren't so good afterwards. So, I mean, again, whether that's because Steve wasn't in control of the company or some other stuff happened, who knows? But again, I've never been the hugest fan of Apple products, even when Steve Jobs was in control of the company. And, it just really makes things weird. Like, I agree with both, and I also disagree with both. So I think both Steve Jobs and the board members were in the right and the wrong of that. But again, it's a great biopic to where what they go through. And again, to the characters really quickly, Ashton Kutcher, great performance of Steve Jobs. Dermot Mulroney as Mike Markula, very well done. Josh Gad in one of, I think, his best roles as Steve Wozniak, and their friendship and how they sort of lose that friendship, to where my friend Thunder said they did reconcile again before Steve Jobs died. And I'm glad to hear that, but it's sad that their friendship almost broke up over that. Lucas Haas, even though it's not a huge role, as Daniel Kotke was really good. Matthew Modine was really good as John Sculley. And then I have to give it to J.K. Simmons also as Arthur Rock, is just the vindictive but yet powerful board member trying to undermine Steve Jobs, but yet understand Steve Jobs, but yet hate what he's doing because it's losing them money and they're in this war that he didn't want or possibly did, who knows, throughout the film. So again, Arthur Rock plays a great antagonist for Steve Jobs in this movie, and J.K. Simmons does that to a T. And I mean, everybody else in this movie had a great role. There's a lot of characters to mention and just too many, but those are the ones I'll mention right off the bat, and the ones that I loved the most throughout this movie. Also give a nod to James Woods as Jack Dudman. It was a short role, but it was awesome to see James Woods in this movie. I thought that was cool. Kevin Dunn, too, is Gil Amelio, the one CEO that they first had before Steve Jobs takes back the company. It was cool to see Kevin Dunn, but also that Kevin Dunn is an afterthought, and they did play him off as the weak-willed CEO toady, but that was nice. But again, I think this is a great biopic of Steve Jobs, where you see the madness and the brilliance of Steve Jobs in one package. And it's a great, great film. But again, have you guys seen Jobs? What do you think? And, just let me know down in the comments down below, and we'll get this discussion going. Until then, this is 012 Boku coming at you with another movie review, and I'll speak to you guys again later, alright? See ya.